That's what we do, man's on the grind, that's what we do. Ain't gonna stop, evolving our game on a daily basis. Stay on the top of the game, experiment in for the win. We ain't gonna lose, the grind don't stop, but I need your boost, I'll see you at the top.
Cool. All right. So really excited today to welcome our second ever guest on the podcast, another absolute legend, Todd Astle. Toddy is a former black cap and Canterbury cricket's highest ever wicket taker. Applied his skills all around the world and is now a mental skills coach. So really looking forward to chewing the fat and pretty timely to reflect on your career as you've just sort of pulled time on the playing side of things and see what's next for you. So welcome along, Toddy. How's things, mate?
Thanks, man. Yeah, look, it's been a really special couple of weeks, really reflecting back on it and all of the kind messages from people that you share the journey with, and everyone's got their own unique experience and stories, and it was nice to relive it. In the weekend, I got caught up with a few mates and just had a couple of drinks, just sort of tell a few lies and a few war stories, and just relive all of those highs and lows over the years. So it's been really cool, actually, just letting it all sink in.
Nice. So I'll just reflect on how we met a long time ago. I can't remember. Was it 2007 or 2012 we were in Munich? You remember
that? For me, it would have been 2012. Yeah, that was Beerfest.
Yeah. So we're at Oktoberfest, and Toddy and I didn't know each other at that point, and we're sitting in the breakfast table of the hotel, like proper cricket tragics, with our club cricket polo shirts on, and I was like, shit, I think it's Todd Astle, and sure enough, it was, and had a bit of a yarn and got to know each other, so it was quite cool. Pretty random way to meet, but pretty classic for a couple of nuffies to have a club cricket polo shirts on the other side of the world.
Well, I probably thought no one would be brave enough to do that over there, and it'd be quite safe. So, unfortunately, yeah, you caught me out, and vice versa.
Yeah, exactly. Nice. Were you just on holiday then? I can't remember. Or were you just finished a playing season or something like that?
Yeah, that was an amazing year, actually. So I went over and played in Buckhurst Hill, which was just out of London.
Oh,
and with it being Olympic year and
yeah, it was good. That's when I was.
There was so much going on, and it was great festivals and events, obviously. And then we tagged on South Croatia and Beer Festival.
It was Queen's Jubilee that year as well, I think, maybe?
Queen's Jubilee, yeah, there was all these things. And then, my sister was over there, best mate, my mum and dad came over, my wife's parents came over. There was just so much happening, which made it a really memorable year.
Yeah, it was nice. It was pretty cool to be over there that year, and I think it was a reasonable summer. It wasn't miserable, but probably a standard summer, but it was pretty okay weather-wise. I think we lost maybe one game to weather, so it's not too bad.
Yeah, ours was the other way. So we are in a floodplain on that ground. So if it rained early in the week, then it was pretty much a lake. So you could actually plan your weekend. That's probably why I was able to go and do all these things. And I could plan my weekends, and I got a really good break from cricket, as well as, enjoying the culture of when you play in the UK. I just love that, because the club is the hub, and they absolutely live for it.
Yeah, so different there, eh? Like, I know when the guys come over, we've got a couple of overseas here at the moment, and it is way different. Like, it's still cool the way we do things, but it's very different to what they do, eh? And it's, I think I remember doing training each night at the club, and the same people were at the club every single night. Just, it was like, as you say, it's like a hub, isn't it? I think they spend more time there than they do at home.
Yeah, I've been fortunate. I've been over a few times and had really special experiences each time. So the first time was in Wigan. I played at a club called Highfield when I was about 19, and you learn a lot when you're out of your comfort zone and away from mum and dad, and learning those life skills. And then 2 years in Aberdeen, which I absolutely love. So I played for Aberdeenshire, and we had some real success on and off the field. That was the real cool couple of years, being able to enjoy that. And then, like I said, at Buckhurst in 2012, and just out of London. So 3 very different experiences, but also rich and memorable.
Yeah, no. Right, well, we'll dial it back a bit, and we'll start with childhood. So I've managed to get a hold of your brother Ryan. He was really keen to get some stuff on. And so I don't know. I was really surprised at some of this, because as far as I know, you're pretty relaxed and well-mannered character. But as a youngster, you're a little bit of live wire from the sound of things.
Yeah, look, we've got quite a competitive pedigree at Astles, and certainly starting from my father. And then having a brother 5 years older, I was always trying to compete with him. And so there was some really heated arguments in the backyard. And so, yeah, I'm sure Ryan would like to embellish on a few of those stories.
Well, that was another thing. I was surprised he described your dad as quite a feisty character too. And I've only met him recently where he's very relaxed and calm. So his nickname was Hate, I believe, his quick bowler.
Yeah, he was an angry fast bowler. Hate and Grizz, I think he had a couple of nicknames. So
Nice.
you can sort of see how that passion and real, I guess we'll call it enthusiasm for the game and setting very high standards.
Well, Ryan's come in pretty hot, and his first words were, "He's a huge cheat." He said, losing any game, he would derail the game. If it was chess, he'd smash the pieces off the board. Computer game, pull the plug. Mini golf, just use the putter like a hockey stick. And occasionally I'd have to pin him down on his knees with his shoulders rolling spit towards him to admit that he'd nicked off.
Yeah, and look, and very kind of Ryan to put that in a public Facebook post too, about how much he shaped me. I guess maybe that was the mental skills test early on, and then it sort of set me up later in my career. And at the time, you sort of think, man, what piece of work growing up, and you have that rivalry and that competition, you sort of that love-hate. And now you look back at it and you go, man, those were some of the coolest memories, just doing all those things together. And we look back at it and kind of laugh. And it's probably like all brothers and sisters, isn't it? It's what sort of shapes you and makes you grow. But at the time, you just think, man, I just hate this guy. He's a pain in the ass.
Yeah. I can read the same thing. But my brother and I were a little bit closer together age-wise, so we used to scrap. But when he got to about 15, we stopped because he started getting bigger than me. So I quit while I was ahead. Yeah. He did say he'd like you to talk about the pool cue incident. Do you remember the pool cue incident?
I remember it vividly, and thankfully it was the small one. So when you can't quite reach, and you get the small one that you can use to help, and so it was very light. But we obviously were having a disagreement around the pool table, and I was obviously that wound up. But I thought, you know what, this could be wrapped around his sort of midriff. And thankfully, he sort of did some sort of karate move or put his arm up and broke the pull cue. So that sort of gets relived on the daily, really, when we're sort of arguing about things.
Nice. And then he has one other one, which was the Kiwi cricket blowout. So I understand Kiwi cricket back in the day, which I think is pretty similar now. They don't keep the score. And you came off the field trying to figure out if you'd won or lost, and Julie found out you'd lost and then dropped an F-bomb as a 6-year-old.
Yeah, much to my mum's absolute shock and probably Dad's delight deep down, but probably said, get in the car, mate, we're getting out of here, and gave me a clip around the ear. I guess that was one of those things when you're a young kid and you just want to always do well and win, and now I've got a 6.5-year-old son trying to talk through those same concepts. He could hardly watch the test yesterday. Obviously it was so close. And he was like, New Zealand are going to lose. And so you're starting to find yourself talking through, going, well, look, if they give it their best effort, then they can live with whatever result. But deep down, I know as a 6-year-old kid as well, I would have been desperate to always try and win.
Yeah. Do you reckon Ryan might have helped you with that vocabulary? Might have heard that once or twice?
Oh, absolutely. No, Ryan was pretty mild-mannered, really, but being 5 years older, and then I had a sister. Well, my sister's 7 years older, so I was the youngest, always trying to keep up, and they always are on at me about being the spoiled, third child. So that's that family dynamic of trying to figure out your place in the pecking order.
Yeah, nice. Cool. He also said you're a bit of a sweet tooth. Loved making sherbet and dream of owning a sweet store. Is that still an ambition?
look, that was my first passion, lollies. And we would have down at the post office, they had 1 for 1 cent lollies. And I have these vivid memories of biking down there and taking sort of $2 or $1. And then the man was obviously busy often. He'd say, look, you can count them out yourself. And being 6 or 7 or 8, however old I was, you're like, 1, 2, 3, and then you're adding so many. And then by the end of it, you've got this bag, which is probably 200 or 300 lollies. And for only, a couple of bucks. And then he's like, oh, that's probably about right, sweet as. So, yeah, I just always had this love of lollies, and there was a dairy right next to the school. So it was always popping in there. And yeah, I think I might have said that to a few people that was my goal in life, was to own a lolly shop. It's changed slightly, thankfully, probably for the teeth, for the better. But yeah, it's funny, isn't it? The things that you think of when you're young and what your aspirations are.
Yeah. Nice. So we'll fast forward sort of teenage years. Can you tell us a little bit about I don't have much research or insight into this part. So can you tell us a little bit about your high school years and how that shaped where you got to there?
Yeah, well, I grew up in Palmerston North. So Dad was deputy principal at Palmerston North Boys High School, and cricket, rugby was kind of in our DNA. I mean, not so much for me in terms of playing rugby, but Dad as a coach at the school. And then he got asked by New Zealand Cricket to become the New Zealand Cricket Development Manager. And that was when I was 12. So what was that, 1998, I think it was, when I made the move to Christchurch. And we had to decide as a family, was this the right move? And Dad tells me still to this day that, yeah, because all the Canterbury cricketers were from Canterbury, I was happy to move, and said, yeah, let's do it. And I went to Christchurch Boys High School, which, I mean, as everyone knows, is a really strong pedigree with cricket. And so for me, it was a really great environment to continue to live and breathe it. And being just down the road, I was always down at the nets and getting throwdowns and bowling bags of balls.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where you learn your craft, your trade.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pick up little routines and idiosyncrasies. You try out everybody's different techniques. And yeah, I guess it was always for me down just practicing and trying to improve and get better. And so throughout that period, I played, first 11 cricket, and then under 15 Canterbury and 17s, 19s teams. And I guess I put that down to just all those hours and hours of in the nets and with Dad. And yeah, Boys High was a special place. And then playing for Canterbury, I think that was my first Canterbury team was at an Island Fields tournament. And I've got a photo there, and I often talk to a couple of the guys that were in the team and just how small and how little you are. And you just sort of have those pipe dreams of going on and playing for New Zealand. And you probably don't quite realise how much goes into that and how far. So it's kind of nice now looking back at those memories and the journey and everything in between.
Yeah. Who were the guns around that Boys High first 11 sort of time?
Darren Broome was the gun batsman, and yeah, Brent Finlay was around there, and Byron Newton. So Byron, you'll know, was the speed of light at the age of sort of 13, 14. I don't know if Byron's grown, kind of like myself. We never really got much bigger. And I caught up with him recently, which was great to see him. Those were sort of the names that were always talked about at that age group. And we always had strong teams and things at Boys High, but often, I guess sometimes it was about, all of the culture and bringing it all together to do well. And so that was the coolest thing in my 7th form year, or year 13, was we got to go on a tour to Australia, and Dad helped sort of co-coach that. So having family there, being there with your mates and being overseas and out of your normal, that was such a special tour to go on. And it was kind of the first insight into traveling away and being with other groups of guys and that sort of camaraderie.
Yeah, nice. Were you one of the little battlers at that age, or were you like just sort of average size, or like at sort of mid-teens?
Yeah, no, I was always physically quite small in stature, and I guess I made up for that in my just tenacity and determination. So I was quite a technically correct top order batsman. That was how I was seen, and to the probably frustration of a lot of parents when Todd Astle was just always batting. And maybe they thought the others weren't getting opportunity, but for me that was just what I just wanted to do, was to be out there. And it was probably about 12, 13, I made the shift from bowling just little mediums, knowing I wasn't probably going to grow much, to then throwing my hand at that leg spin.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was probably more in those latter years of high school where I could really develop that as well, and became the extra string to my bow rather than just the top water batting.
Yeah, nice. I've got heaps of clients who are that sort of bit like that. This small guy who great technique, and they really battle away for a bit. And I actually reckon it's actually an advantage, because those big man childs who often dominate that sort of 13, 14, 15-year-olds, and no fault of their own, don't have to pick up that technical stuff, or they don't have probably as much bad days, so they don't learn the resilience and stuff. And then I find a lot of them get caught up at that older age, and then a lot of them probably fall away a bit because they feel like they've been caught up and it's not as fun as much as it was, So even though I reckon that it probably feels like at the time it's a bit of a disadvantage being smaller, it's actually probably an advantage, because you've got to work a lot harder. You have, a lot of tougher days, and then as a result, you probably catch up and be better in the long term. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I'd imagine there's a strong argument for that. And like you say, yeah, you've got to come through and persevere and have that ability to overcome some early adversities. Whereas, those bigger ones that perhaps they get more opportunity, it's then how do you maintain that, I guess, perspective, and staying humble, and seeing how can you keep growing and developing, and especially when you then become back into the pack, and when you've always had it probably easier. Yeah, there's certainly those arguments, but I was probably certainly more in that younger mold, and physically not as strong or able in that department, so I had to make the most of what I had.
Yeah, nice. Cool. So move on to sort of adult sort of years. Got a bit of insight from Fultz and Donks. So both of them obviously talked about, how impressed they were with how you evolved as a player. So obviously, probably talk about shortly how you changed from your role as a opening bat to a spinner. And one particular thing that Fultz wanted to talk about was, actually, we'll just talk about it. So you started your career as an opening batter. At what age were you when you sort of broke into that Canterbury stuff, and how long did that happen before you sort of made that change?
Like I mentioned earlier, all of my age group cricket was batting in the top order, and virtually once I got to under 19s, I started opening the batting, and that was my way in, I suppose. When Dave Nosworthy was the first coach that I came in on board with Canterbury. And I was, I guess, thrown in the deep end in a way. I never really thought of it that way. It was, my opportunity was, I got contracted at 18, and I think my debut was when I was 19. I vividly remember my debut at QE2, and Ian O'Brien and Mark Gillespie were steaming in. Stephen Fleming was at first slip. Grant Elliott was chirping me. Jesse Ryder. Some incredible players, and I vividly remember as well being 19 and going, geez, this isn't schoolboy cricket. I'm not maybe as good as maybe I thought I was, and ready for this level. And maybe that was the first instance around the mental side of it, was actually kind of going, okay, well, I had a little sniff, and then didn't get a great deal the rest of that season, because I went over to the World Cup for the Under-19 World Cup and did well, and then came back and probably saw the benefits of that later in the season. So it was certainly, through being a top order batsman, and then, having to figure out how I was going to succeed and do well. And I don't think I ever quite nailed that, having had a few years of opportunity. And look, the end of the batting era finished with a run of low scores. But it's interesting now that if I hit the
exact number,
that number of 4 zeros in my first outie.
Was it?
Yeah, so outies symbol A, the 4 0. So I had that, and I actually got 5 ducks in 6 innings. So it was a pretty traumatic experience. And coming out the other side, I was kind of going, well, jeepers, do I give up? What do I want to do? Am I still a top order batsman? And it was all those types of questions. And it probably wasn't until I went away overseas and sort of start having a bit more life balance, figuring out more what I wanted to do. Back to uni, all of those things that I guess it was not always then about cricket. And growing up so much, I was the talented one, or I was talked about as the chosen, sort of like going through the ranks. And I certainly let that get to that identity piece, and there wasn't a whole lot else. And so then it was, stepping back and figuring out what else is there around the uni, and first house, buying that with my girlfriend, who's now my wife, at a younger age. And so then you're talking about your wills and you're talking about mortgages, and you get forced to grow up, and there's a lot more going on. So that was a really important period. As much as I probably thought it was really difficult, that actually helped shape, certainly later on into my career.
Nice. So did you have a spell between where you didn't play for Canterbury there, or did you came off contract, or did you stay in there and manage to bring the leg spin up in time, or how did that happen?
Well, thankfully, in a way, that run of scores happened at the end of the season.
Right.
Oddly enough, the start of that season, I got my first class 100.
Yeah.
And then you had to break for white ball games. And I was always considered more of a 4-day player. So I wasn't getting any opportunity really in the limited overs. And then later in that season, that was when it all sort of unfolded. And it meant that I could then go overseas, get back to enjoying things, kind of put things in place. I came back still thinking I was top order batsman, and got an opportunity, I think, when Fultz got called up to the Black Caps, and that meant that I could come in and bat at 5. But still wasn't really nailing it down. I was all over the show. You know, when you're getting bits and pieces and you're kind of desperate and you're getting those crumbs, but you're not really getting much of a crack.
Yeah.
And it was at that point, that was a real shift. And I think it was 2010. I started working a little bit with Scott Borthwick, who was another leg spinner. He came over and played at our club.
Oh, yeah.
And it was just naturally just bowling a little bit quicker, just collaborating with other spinners. Again, I went back and enjoyed being around a group of guys at Old Boys Collegians. And I can't emphasize that enough. When you come back to just that pure enjoyment, that camaraderie, it just flowed on to then taking wickets at club level, scoring runs. And then sure enough, Chris Martin got called into the Black Caps. And it was halfway through a 4-day game. And I got called in more of a spinner for this game. So flying down, bag, look, I'm sick and tired of always feeling fear of failure and not being enough. So I wrote down belief, energy, and enjoyment. And these were the 3 things I just wanted to bring to my persona, to the performance. And it was nothing about runs and wickets.
Yeah.
But I think everyone there could sort of see it very clearly that it was just this difference in me. And I just came out and whacked 30 odd, got my first 5-wicket bag. And I then got another one the next game. In the last game of that season, I got a 6 for. So it was just this dramatic transformation. So then the next year being bowler of the year, and then fast forward 3 years, I'm Canterbury's highest first class wicket taker. So the most bizarre turnaround, but I wouldn't change it for the world now, obviously.
Yeah. Did you, when you came up with that mantra, did you have someone help you with that, or you came up with it yourself, or is it part of your study, or how did that come about? Oh, you there?
You were cutting in and out, sorry, Dan, but I kind of got the gist of it. But I certainly remember at Under-19 World Cup in Sri Lanka, and we had a little diary, and you write down some key things. And for me, most of the time, it kept coming up similar type concept words, and it was kind of about who do I want to sort of personify when I'm out there, and who I'm representing, all of those types of things. And I feel like that was the chance to then try and bring that, being more of a bowling all-rounder where you can express yourself probably and play a little bit more of an attacking style, batting at sort of 6 or 7. And then as a bowler, I just love when the ball's in your hand, there's more of that competition. How are you getting them out? How are you getting in the fight to contribute to, trying to win games for your team? And that's what I think I've always loved the most about bowling.
Yeah, nice. One thing Fultz wanted to do to bring out, he said you absolutely used to spray him when you took him off the bowling, regardless of if it was your fault or the situation. He said the opposition must have thought you were nuts. Has that changed a little bit since then?
Yeah, and I've got to thank Fultz a lot for that, because that period of time, I wasn't quite sure probably how to manage my emotions. And having been an opening batsman, when you get out early, you go and you sit and you stop, you process it. As a bowler, when you're getting hit around the park and you're sort of standing around, it was almost my way of covering my insecurities and doubts, was to sort of get angry. angry with myself, kind of pick a argument with the opposition batter. Faults would often be on the receiving end. And thankfully, to his credit, he's very level-headed. And so he kind of knew how to manage me and go, right, okay, come back in a few overs and go the other end. And so, that was certainly a period where I probably didn't quite know how to deal with a lot of the stuff that was going on. And thankfully, he could sort of see that there was potential there enough to stick with me. And I'm thankful, and I know Fultz and I have played a lot together, and we've had some great times and stories. But at the core of it, he always, I think, cared about how he could get the best out of me. And then obviously now being a coach, he continues to do that with our Canterbury group and all the guys coming through, who he's probably had a significant part as a captain, but now obviously as a coach.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to chat. I'll hopefully get him on here at some stage, because it must have been quite a tricky thing to juggle, going so close to being a player to a coach. That would be quite tricky to juggle. So, but he seems to have done a bloody good job, so full credit to him. So Donks came up with a bit of stuff. He said both actually, Fultz and Donks mentioned you're obviously a really big family man. Give a lot back to your children and your immediate family. Your wife Rachel, your wife said that you give endless throwdowns to your son, but you're also happy to do some ballet dancing and colouring and unicorns with your daughter. So, how's the family life contributed to you?
Massively. Like you said before, around those highs and lows of emotions, I think that's the biggest thing, becoming a parent, that perspective. And it's not about you anymore, and you're trying to be that role model. And I've always wanted to show to my kids that I can, be outrageous, have fun. Also, there's that serious side, and you're trying to do the best by them. And so that was the thing with cricket. It often takes you away from them for long periods of time. And I feel very, very, just stoked. And that emotion, that pride, and the fact that they could see me in my last game, having a home final at Hagley, and they're at an age where I feel like they will be able to remember Dad going out there and playing and doing the thing that he loved. And it's hard because it's taken me away from them for so many periods of time. But I kind of hope that when they're older, they'll realise that Dad was chasing his dream and he was doing that for the right reasons. So I am, I guess, really appreciative and grateful of certainly Rach and what she's put up with and gone through. She's been there with me since the day one, being a professional cricketer. So that's the ultimate partnership with Rach.
Yeah, nice. Is that what helped you make that decision of when to retire? Like that sort of like being home a bit more, or what was it that made that easy for you, or what made you decide this is the right time?
Well, I've sort of been tapering off, and as you know, I just cricket a few years ago. And it was always what was going to be right for me and my family. And finishing that test in what was the New Year's test, wasn't it, in Sydney? So 2020 early on, and giving it my all and getting a chance to have a crack against the Aussies. And I knew deep down it was going to be my last one. It was that real sense of satisfaction of knowing that I'd given it everything to that format, and then knowing I still wanted to give back to the game and play in one days and T20s. And I've never missed playing the 4 days, even then when I finished the 1 days. And that, I guess, to me, validates that reason of doing that. This will be the interesting test, is now finishing fully and missing out with that camaraderie of the group of guys. And that's what I've always loved. And so this was a chance to have another crack at a final. And then the stars all aligned. Like, we got a home final. We've had 3 now. And it wasn't to be, but having said that, having everyone there was the special moment, really, all the friends and family, and seeing one last time at Hagley. And it was probably a few weeks before that I realised it takes so much to really go all into a campaign and to do it again. And I just thought, well, I still love the game. I still want to finish with that buzz rather than it being a drag or bitter about it and being forced through injury or selection. So that was certainly the reasons why I finished.
A couple of things Donks mentioned. So he said you're highly admired for doing things on your own terms, highly competitive, which we've already talked about, and always thinking of the team before yourself. later in your career, giving back to the changing room, especially the younger players, and you said your leadership has been invaluable the last few years. So can you tell us just a little bit about how that development of your leadership has sort of taken place and what that's meant to you?
Well, if I think back to when I started with Canterbury, I was getting to play with all of the guys I grew up watching on TV and with such huge role models. Yep. So to then, have, Cairns and Nathan Astle and McMillan, Harris, Bond, Chris Martin, there's all these names. There's more obviously there. It was kind of crazy to then be amongst these guys and playing. And then within a couple of years, they'd sort of all filtered out.
Yeah.
So that was the hard thing, was just this real vacuum then of senior players that I was fortunate to still have steady there. So Gary Stead played another year, Michael Paps, Peter Fulton. And I felt like, it was a tough environment to learn your trade, because Dave Mossworthy was probably a really hard-nosed South African. It wasn't so much about the culture. It was kind of like, very direct. And it probably meant that we didn't have that ability to bring our personalities. Right. And so if I look at the group now and we were at, look, it's incredible to think that people can come in and be so much themselves. Yeah. To a point where I think the real success was when we were all singing To the Greatest Showman before the final last year, when we were all watching it in the same room. And you've got 12 guys that are comfortable in their own skin, to be able to express themselves like that, I think is pretty darn unique. And I've always probably, wanted to repay that legacy of people believing in me. And for me, that was always about how can you grow the group, the environment, that culture piece. So I've often led social committees, tried to include partners, all the sponsors, types of events where you can do that. Yeah. And I guess through just my sheer volume of playing and experience, it was important to then pass on the key lessons and learnings from all those senior guys. So then the next crew can carry it on. And I get called the Todd father, which I quite like that tag. I think Kane Williamson was the first that gave it to me, because I've had some really interesting nicknames over the years. So that one was always quite nice, because it sort of has that connotation of looking after the others and ones that have come through. And that's what I love, is that I've seen guys develop more so off the field, and you see them doing well on the field. There's nothing better, but it's all of the mateship, and that'll continue for a life. A lifelong sort of journey, which is the really really cool feeling, sort of having finished and knowing that those are still going to be there.
Nice. He also talks about, obviously, a great example of resilience and evolution, and obviously a big one, which I imagine would be a tricky part of it, is the international career. So it's a few overseas tours, but didn't get to play always. And he did say the 2019 World Cup would have been a tough one, maybe to miss out on that. So I imagine being a leg spinner in New Zealand, where there's pretty limited spots, and then even when there is a spot, sometimes they don't even play a spinner. How was that to sort of manage?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. That throughout, from probably 2012 till 2021, where I went to the World Cup, T20 World Cup in Dubai, I look at those periods of time where I've probably been really bitter about things. I've been frustrated. You might be trying to reason with everything, and every time I would do that, it's always coming back to how can I contribute to whichever team I'm playing for. Yeah. And how can I bring my best self? And I know that then it's very hard in the first few instances when you get little sniffs and you're not quite getting opportunities where you feel like others perhaps have had more loyalty, or your stats are compared. And all those things, though, I would find would detract from my actual enjoyment of the game. And every time I came back to that, I kind of refound that perspective and focus. And certainly the last 4 or 5, or probably 3 or 4 years, when I did play for New Zealand, I did well, and I kind of knew my place, that if I was getting an opportunity, it may not be for a long time. So I might as well go and give it everything that I could and bring that enthusiasm and competitiveness. And it often would lead to good performances. And so, there was never a bitterness by the end. It was almost that acceptance and really proud of what I could achieve and had been a part of. And New Zealand cricket over that decade has never been stronger. And that's the really cool thing is seeing where the group's got to with performances, but also off the field too, which, as we know, has such a direct correlation to on it.
Yeah, nice. That leads quite well into so I thought I'd touch base with young Blake Coburn because he's probably another fellow leg spinner in the Canterbury setup. So I imagine you would have had a fair bit of influence on him. So he gave me a little bit. He said, obviously, being a leg spinner, you have good days and some horrid days. So having another spinner in the team with someone with such experience to talk about your feelings and when you start second guessing yourself, it was very beneficial, and he really appreciated your input. He also said getting his mindset right and not comparing himself to finger spinners or other spinners around. So similar stuff that you've mentioned. And about understanding his role. He's an attacking bowler that needs to take wickets rather than just trying to bowl dots like maybe an off spinner. So he certainly said you absolutely massive influence on his career. So that must be a pretty cool thing to have. But Blake's obviously a little bit different to the standard leg spinner. So yeah, anything there?
Well, again, I think Blake, unfortunately, has sort of had to wait in the wings, and equally kind of like what I've had to do with New Zealand, he's sort of waiting behind me.
Yeah.
And that's the really tough scenario, is that, there's often not much between spinners, and Ish and I as well. And Ish and I are kind of the ones that would be always vying for positions for New Zealand. But we have such a strong relationship because of, I think, those understandings that it is so unique.
Yeah.
And it's almost brought us closer together.
Yeah.
And I guess then it's trying to relay those messages to Blake around using this time to be seeing it as an apprenticeship, to learn your role. So when you do get opportunities, to make the most of it. And again, that piece around having balance and other things going on in your life will lead to performances on the field. So I'm really, I guess, purposeful with those relationships and value them so much because I know how difficult it can be and how hard all of the inner turmoil can be at times. So it's just sometimes having people to vent to, having people to sort of be in your corner, even if they are sometimes keeping you probably out of the team.
I actually coached Blake a little bit as a youngster, and he's done a little bit of work for me. So I actually remember when he sort of, I think he initially got picked or contracted, then had a couple off, and then contracted again. So I've been pretty pleased to see these hung in there because I know as a youngster, I think he probably had a few moments where he thought, maybe I'm not going to get there. So I'm just pleased to see him out there still working hard, and he seems to be really, really flourishing. So it'd be cool to see where it takes him.
Well, it's that resilience piece, and that's the important thing. Like, I didn't start playing consistently for Canterbury, all three formats, till I was probably 27, sort of 28.
Yeah.
And that all came about through being told directly pretty much that I needed to bowl faster after, my test debut was probably a year or so later, that I have to bowl faster or I wasn't going to play at the highest level again.
Yeah. And
so you go away with that information, kind of go, well, how do I process that? And so for me, it was fortunate to work with guys like Luke Ronke and on the A trip, Tom Latham, those sort of top order batsmen, to figure out what pace you need to be at, and then working with strength and conditioning coaches and the coaches, and you're getting all that feedback to kind of go, okay, how can I keep improving? And if you keep coming back to those daily improvements, getting better, seeking feedback, so much of it is that term growth mindset, where you have to just keep getting knocked down, learning from it, growing. And that has allowed me then to play 3 formats for New Zealand, to be a part of World Cup, to achieve some incredible individual but also team accolades, and that's all come about from those changes, which sometimes you don't want to hear, and it does mean that sometimes face adversity and they decide to go one way. And as we all know, that it's that resilience to see adversity and come out the other side and use it to your advantage.
Yeah, exactly. I'll come back to something I just remembered I missed about the club champs. But while we're on this, so that leads quite well. So developing leg spinners in New Zealand, I reckon, the kids I'm coaching at the moment, there's so many leg spinners, but I see a lot of them give it up after probably when they get into their teens, because they go to, this is what I think happens, they tend to go to high school where they may not get as much coaching, or they have a captain that doesn't bowl them, and then they just go, oh, just bowl some needs, so get an over or two. So I just wonder if there's any advice you give a young leg spinner who, might be just missing out opportunities, or still learning their craft and bowling a few drag downs, and or a captain that doesn't bowl them. What would you give them as advice?
An arm around the shoulder and tell them to hang in there.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing. You think back to the best coaches, they're often not with all the technical knowledge, all the tactics. It's the ones that get around you and support you and will have your back. They might give you a kick up the bum to keep you accountable, but they are there. They care for you in your development, and that's so much of what a spinner needs. And like I mentioned with Fultz as a captain and as a coach, that understanding is huge. And I guess then to those that maybe don't know how to manage a spinner or understand it, it's trying to find those that can be a mentor, or give them that support, so then they have that outlet, because that is so crucial, as we know, not only leg spinners but all cricketers, but we are a special bunch, spinners and leg spinners in particular.
Yeah, exactly. Nice. So Nighty gave me a bit of insight as well. He was actually really good. One particular one, he said when he first moved to Christchurch or New Zealand, you had just started reinventing yourself. So it was the season that was most enjoyable for him, seeing you play. You won the batting title, you scored the most hundreds, but also the most ducks. Standing at slip with you and Scotty Borthwick was amazing, with leggies at both ends. And he also mentioned the mantra, which you've already told us about, but he did mention the club champs. So can you give us some insight into that club champs that he's talking about? And he also mentioned, can you ask who Ricky Bobby is?
Oh, what a time. What a season. That was a really amazing period of time for the club. And I just remember it so vividly that we won the one-day competition, and we had to beat Canterbury Country in the final at Burnside. And look, they were a pretty stacked team. And we won that to then qualify to go up to Club Nationals, which we'd never been at. And back then it was obviously over 6 days where you're playing one-day games back-to-back, which for a club side is quite a big ask. Yeah. And we obviously did quite well over the first few games. We had a washout. I had to fly back for photos for Canterbury and a prize giving. Went back and we lost the game against the team that we then ended up playing in the final, only just. But as fate would see it, we played them only because we won against Eastern Suburbs. Now, Eastern Suburbs are a very, how do I put this delicately, unique team from Wellington. They're passionate about their cricket, and they held no prisoners. So that they mean business. They may not socialise with others. They may not make friends. And there was a particular incident where I was batting, and I probably didn't agree with a decision from the umpire, and I might have questioned it politely. And then I got an absolute mouthful from this guy called Ricky, not sure of his surname, so they started calling him Ricky Bobby, from the guy off Talladega Nights. And I ended up thinking, well, no, I'm not going to take that. So I took off my pads and I walked all the way around the Cornwall Park to the fine leg boundary where this guy was placed. And I asked him who his name was. And it led to a bit of verbal bashing going back and forward between us. I don't know if anyone came out on top. And so we only ended up getting about 160, not many, on small boundaries. And they were cruising. They had some good players. And we then must have taken a couple of wickets. And then I came on to bowl, and after a few overs, I managed to get a couple of wickets. And then I was on a hat trick. And so who walks out? Sorry, I got the first wicket, and then he was the second wicket, I must say. So he was walking out to bat. The game was sort of in the balance a little bit. He was getting it from all of our guys. And it was one of those balls where you picture it, I'm going to bowl a wrong in, and I could just see it before it even left my hand that it's going to go through the gate and clean bowl him.
Yeah.
And sure enough, as it left my hand, it was perfect. It was on the money. And literally before it bowled him, everyone was sort of in his face, giving him the biggest send-off. The next guy came out, was the captain. I ended up bowling him around his legs to get a hat trick. And so we needed, I think, 1 wicket, and they needed about 10 runs.
Yeah.
And at that stage, Theo Van Workum got the guy LBW with not many to go. And that was probably the loudest we've ever sung our team song. And so Ricky Bobby is well known now around OBC circles. And then, we went on to win that final the next game. So, very, very memorable period of time, that club chance.
Nice. Classic. So in terms of, we'll move on to sort of your coaching. Oh, actually, no, umpires. So another thing that Fultz mentioned, do you reckon that a few umpires might be celebrating the fact that you've retired? Did you used to put a little bit of gentle heat on them? Is that what he means?
Umpires, I probably had a bit of a checkered relationship at times. I don't know. I sort of struggle, I think, sometimes with incompetence and with those that aren't willing to give personality as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, you can build up a rapport with an umpire and you may disagree, but of course you can talk it through. So there were times where, certainly I probably took it to the limit, and there will be a few that are probably happy I've decided to hang up the boots. And look, I say to that, look, I know no one's perfect. And so they're doing the best that they can. And I'm a passionate, competitive guy that obviously wants to do well for the team. So there was times when those things would all collide. And hopefully at the end of it, though, I would always, most of the time, be able to, talk with them and still, have a decent relationship off the field.
Nice. I like to think the art of tuning an umpire would, I don't know if you agree, would be just enough rapport, just enough pressure, but as you say, still be able to have a beer afterwards. That generally creates wickets. You agree with that?
Yeah, and in club level, as you know, later in the day, some of that good rapport will play in your favour.
Yeah, exactly. Nice. So 90 also mentioned, and you've kind of already touched on this, the change of coaching throughout the years, and now you're obviously moving into the coaching space yourself. Who the coaches that had the biggest influence on you, and how have you seen it change over the last few years?
I think, like so many young kids, like their father has a huge impact, and mine most certainly has.
Yeah.
Like I've mentioned earlier, all of the hours of throwdowns and dedication that he's given, and even my mum, obviously, all of the times that they have to take you to games and the travel and the lunches and debriefs. So I certainly have a lot to owe to them. In terms of coaches later in my career, like I've been fortunate to have some that were great cheerleaders, like Gary McDonald or Mike Shrimpton.
Yeah.
Dave Nosworthy was my first coach. While he was very intense, he was great around time management and that, understanding what it takes to go to the next level.
Yeah.
Bob Carter's been a big part of things. Like he's great around that support, and he's been great to sort of just has a regular mentor throughout the years. And I'm fortunate that Steady and Fultz I both played with, so I have this really unique relationship. Steady, I unfortunately had to deal with him telling me I wasn't playing for New Zealand, but I always had that mutual respect. So there was kind of those tough messages, but I knew that it always came from a place of understanding and Fultz, same thing. It's a strange dynamic going from being one of your best sort of mates and teammates to then your coach. Yeah. So that was kind of a bit tricky. It was kind of going, okay, how do we work out that give and take and my ability to come and go a little bit, just playing one format or two formats. And I think we've made that work. You have to have a little bit of separation of boundaries, but we've always got that understanding and love of Canterbury and red and black. And look, I've been fortunate to have so many. I mean, and Donks has been around that sort of group as well. So I sort of put him in that mold. There's so many that have helped. And I could keep rattling off names. I suppose, it's a hard one. There's so many at different points in your career, and how much of an impact they play at different parts is very, very different, but also influential.
Yeah, sure. Nice. One thing that Nighty mentioned was how you kind of, when you first started the mental skills space, you kind of, IBC was kind of the test pilot. So he talked about when he was first president, he got you in to set up the objectives of the club, and then you created the Be the Club mantra, which had massive buy-in and connection immediately. So can you tell us a little bit about Be the Club and what happened there? The club's done all right this year too, I see.
Yeah. Oh, that's the really proud thing for me and special to be a part of that with the club. And I have so much to owe to them early in my career, playing so much for them. And then you go away and you play more for Canterbury and higher honours, and it means that you're not around as much, and you still want to be able to play a part. And for me, that was sort of that culture, that environment, and setting standards. And there was a few of us that I guess got together and wanted to facilitate something. And I thought, well, you know what, I'll use my profile and wanting to get into this sort of mental skills space. At that point in time, I didn't really know what it was. It was kind of evolving into that, and it was a good opportunity to get everyone together to buy into something bigger than just themselves. And from that evening, we kind of went through, look, where are we at? What's going to lead to our success? More so, off the field, because that'll lead to on it. It was all of those sort of standards and the buy-in. And then, you know what? From that, we then had, these titles, these guys going for higher honours. There was just that flow-on effect. And every year we kind of come back to those key things. And that was the cool thing, was that in that room, they came up with that term around Be the Club. And essentially drilled down, they wanted to be the club that other clubs looked at that was leading the way, that was, holding the highest standard, that people wanted to go to that club. They wanted to support that club. They wanted to have everything to do with it. So every year we kind of have to reevaluate and review that. But yeah, again, I think that's that buy-in piece that often at club level, it's just like a hand out mentality rather than hand up. And so I wanted to change that and get everyone on board.
Nice.
That was the really cool thing, was from that and seeing that success. It was then, how can I keep branching out and do more of that? And that's certainly a part of that early journey of the mental skill space.
Nice. And about that mental skill space, so obviously you that's going to be, I assume that's going to be your main sort of gig from now on. What in terms of coaches that aren't specifically trained as mental skills coaches, how do you think we can help them incorporate mental skills into sort of mainstream coaching, and just being a bit more aware of it and being able to sort of introduce that piece?
Yeah, and I think often we talk about all these other skills, so the physical, the technical, tactical, and the higher you go in any field or industry, it's often talked about the top 2 inches, because there's more judgment, scrutiny, consequences, pressure. And yeah, we don't know where to turn. And so it was trying to understand then, how do you normalize that? So that's how I've got into this. And I've worked with so many different groups and teams and individuals. And that's why I've developed my online course now, is to try and make it accessible to the masses, so then they have access to it and they can pick up the information and tools and tips. And so for coaches that are out there, it's just their understanding of, first and foremost, about them, who they are, what they want to achieve, and how they're going to do that. And so then you're trying to do that again for your players. And so that mental piece is so important. And it's putting things in place around understanding their athletes' goals, their ambitions, their routines, their well-being, how they, manage themselves under stress and with distractions, and all of these types of things, to create that overall bigger picture for them, rather than just hitting drop drives or net sessions. Yeah. As we know, the more that we can understand our athletes and give them that sort of full wraparound package, then it's going to lead to the performances on the field. And that's why I'm so passionate about it, and individually, but also then, like we've just discussed, how you can do it in a group as well, and then make it a regular skill that you actually do, rather than just a one-off. Often that's kind of seen, like a tick and we're happy. It's like any other skill, you got to put the work in.
Yeah, exactly. Nice. I'll be interested if your take on baseball, because I think that's pretty much what they're doing, right? Like, they're just basically freeing people up and giving them the chance to play their own way. And I mean, compared, like, they haven't changed their personnel a hell of a lot other than some coaching staff. So, yeah, what's your piece on Bazball? I know Brendan hates that name, but
Well, I absolutely love the style of play. I think it's great because it's reinventing it and it's making it fun to watch again. And then other teams will have to raise their game to match it. And it's been successful. Not every team is going to have the same skill set and abilities, but like you say, it's almost freeing them of a mindset of playing with fear. And I mean, I guess if I look at the England setup in one day and T20 cricket, they have been formidable for a number of years. And I guess they're now bringing in a lot of that mindset to what they do in Test cricket. It's just allowing them to go out and express themselves, to play with a certain style that's going to be so attacking that it puts the opposition on the back foot. That you can't help but feel like you want to be on board with it. And the way that their players are responding, it's just showing you that they're playing with that freedom and that excitement that you want to, like you were when you were a kid, that you're just loving going out there. And that's what I love watching it, is because it looks like really appealing. It may be a bit tough though as a bowler and a spinner when you're kind of going at eights and it's a bit of a different sort of mentality, but I think that's where teams will have to keep progressing, because you see the developments in the other versions of the game. I think this is the next sort of thing probably with Test cricket.
Yeah, that's right. I think I've been talking to a few of the English guys in our club that there are a couple of overseas players, and one in particular is quite strict. Like he likes it in some ways, but then he says, oh, but then they did this, and it's like, well, you can't really have both ways, right? Like if they're gonna take a few risks, and it's worked. They've won what 9 out of 10 Test series or something now. Like it's a lot better than what was working in the past. So.
Well, change is a hard thing to accept, and so many are set in that style. But the proof's in the pudding, and they have done it time and time again. And when they've lost, they've done it in a way that they can still hang their head on it. And that's what I kind of like, is that, they seem to be all on board. And it's not going to mean that they play that way every time. You just can't. There's going to be times where you have to grit something out and fight. But it certainly, to me, looks like an environment that they're thriving in. And that's all that you can ask for, I suppose, as coaches and players.
Yeah, exactly. Nice. I guess it's just innovation, isn't it? Like, I think the guy I was talking to keeps saying it's always going outside the norm. It's low percentages, and well, I thought it was going to be low percentage, but the percentages have been reasonably good, right? Like most of them are scoring more runs playing this way than they were the other way. So
yeah. So we'll see what happens, I suppose, in the next week period, what other teams do, and how far it can go.
Ashes should be a good series. Have you been watching the Aussie Test just now?
It's on at the moment. No, I've watched the other, because I love watching it in India when there can just be such drama and theatre with spinners.
Well, Aussie just bowled India out for about 90, and I think Aussie are 59 for 1, but it's ragging. You'll be loving it. It's ragging sideways.
But that's again another aspect that you don't want to lose. That I think that's cool that certainly away series provides those challenges, and that's the greatest thing, is when you do win away from home.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what will keep me watching. Like I love sort of the attacking style, and also playing spinners, and that's, I suppose, what New Zealand have done so well over a long period of time is worked. And so now we might have to evolve, and players move on. So we've had such an incredible group of guys that have all gone through together. It's going to start to change over time now.
Yeah, exactly. Nice. We'll wrap things up, mate. But before we go, Alistair he loves a wee five, calls it the quick fire general knowledge quiz. So we had Robbie Fruin on last week, and he got some pretty tough questions. These aren't easy either. He was 1 from 5, so you two to win for here. So if you're ready, what was the first sport to be televised in America?
Cricket.
No, baseball.
I thought it was a trick question. Now it's a cricket interview.
Yeah. Good enough. Which aviation company, I have no idea this one, produced the DC series of aircraft? That's right. That's tough. Unless you're Richard McCaw, you probably might know this.
Yeah, can I call a friend?
Any idea?
Boeing.
No, McDonnell Douglas. Hopefully they get easier from here. What say soccer here, but I'll say football team has won the Premier League in 2014. 2004, sorry, 2004. These are tough, Alistair.
Sorry, say that last bit again.
What soccer team won the Premier League in 2004? I was just saying they're tough questions. Alistair's stitched you up here.
Won in 2004.
Yeah.
I'm going to say Arsenal because that's my brother's
Oh,
team.
he's got it. He's pulled it out. Well done. He's on the board.
There you go. Bob Carter will be happy. Henry Nichols, all those Arsenal supporters.
Nice, nice. What type of alcoholic drink is a manzanilla? Never heard of this.
I've never ordered one.
What's the alcohol?
Manzanilla.
What's the alcohol?
I don't have enough cocktails to know. Manzilla.
I'll give you a clue. I reckon it's a bit of an old person's drink. Oh, I would call it that.
Is it a gin?
No, it's sherry.
Okay.
Okay, last couple. When I got this either, where are fortune cookies invented?
I would say it's somewhere an Asian country. I'm going to go with China.
You would think so, but apparently it's the United States.
Okay.
Last one. You need one more. Oh, yes, you need one more. How many bends is there in a standard paperclip?
How many bends?
Yeah, how many times is it bent to make a paperclip?
5.
Oh, three. You and Robbie are tied. One apiece.
I'll be thinking about that. I need to find a paperclip. I'm in good company then.
Yeah. They're pretty
At least I
tough
got off
questions.
the mark.
They're pretty tough questions. I don't know where Alistair gets these from, but massive thanks, mate, for giving up your time. We really appreciate having you on and sharing all that you've shared from right way back to all the highs and the lows and the specialist spin stuff, and then of course the mental skills side of things. So we wish you all the best in the remainder of where you're going now with the mental skills space and in a spin. And congratulations on an amazing career, and thanks again for sharing your story with us, mate. So thanks again.
Thanks, Dan. I always enjoy connecting with you, and yeah, keep doing the good work that you're doing in the coaching space.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for listening to the Evolve Your Game podcast. Hope you've taken some insight and enjoyed what we had to offer today. Make sure you like and subscribe and share on your socials. Tag us. We would like to see who's listening. And we'll catch you back next week on the Evolve Your Game podcast.